He is a New York Times bestselling author, entrepreneur, venture capital investor, and fun fact, a professional jazz guitarist. Over 30 years, he's helped over 100 startups launch and scale, establishing himself as a global expert on innovation. Now, if you were with us to start out the day, you knew that we were asking some of our presenters their breakthrough conversation. Doug talked about the importance of asking questions. Cassandra talked about a conversation with her mom. And we asked Josh Linkner beforehand, what is your breakthrough conversation? And I absolutely love this one. Josh said when he told his wife, Tia, how he really felt. So full disclosure, she worked at his company, and he said, how cliche, I know. He said they became great friends, but he was older than her and pretty sure that he wasn't her type. He said he never flirted with anyone at work or crossed the line, even for a second. HR leaders, I know what you're thinking. So this was a big risk, but he didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable and didn't want to create an HR nightmare. So he said for months, he just figured it wouldn't happen. But eventually, Josh's feelings grew so strongly, he felt he had to take the risk and tell her. He did a lousy job, of course, telling her how he felt. She seemed shocked, and he said he immediately regretted it, but his heart told him he just, you know what? He had to do it. He had to share their feelings and continue. So that actually was 15 years ago. Josh has been married for 10 years. He has beautiful 7-year-old twins, and now Tia is the true love of his life. And he said, and I love this line, he still gets butterflies when he sees her. Every time she walks into a room, everything fades to black. Can we just get a collective aw in the chat? Josh is all heart. I've respected him for years. He is a phenomenal speaker. And he said, I can't imagine how sad he'd be if he hadn't worked up the nerve to have that conversation. And he said the lesson. We often think that risk is only about action, but often the far greater risk is inaction. So good. And he said the key point, we overestimate the risk of trying something new, yet we underestimate the risk of standing still. Look, this is a reality show in itself. Let's bring him out. Josh Linkner is his name. He's here to help us create our own big little breakthroughs. Romantic Josh Linkner. It's good to see you, my friend.
Great to see you. Thanks for that lovely introduction. That is, by the way, 100% true story. I was really stressed out, but thankfully she said yes, and here we are today. So I appreciate you, appreciate your leadership today, and excited for our conversation. So hello, everybody. My name is Josh, and I'll be guiding you through this next session here. We're going to have some fun. We're going to really explore how we can inject innovation, not only to people wearing lab coats, not only to people wearing hoodies or in the C-suite, but to every box on the org chart. And in doing so, I think we really liberate our entire organizations and prepare them for the best possible future. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll dive right on in. As we know, in times of volatility and change, like we find ourselves in right now, success is not always a straight path. And it reminded me, as I was preparing for today, of a situation a couple years back. I'll never forget it. It was 15 minutes before the worst meeting I'd ever have to have in my life. I made promises I couldn't keep. I disappointed those who were counting on me. I let everybody who loved me down. I was ashamed, and I was failing. In that moment, I was unprepared for change. Instead of innovating, I was clinging so desperately to the way things were. I thought we were insulated, that our success of the past would carry forward forever. And as we know, that is certainly not a recipe for success. The sad thing is that many leaders, and specifically HR leaders, are going to find themselves in that exact same spot over the next decade, as the increase in volatility and change and technology disruption continues at a record-breaking pace. But not you, not after today, and not after, of course, the incredible support from our friends at BetterWorks. Little context, though, on this story. A few weeks earlier, I was in New York City, sitting across a big marble table from my investor at the time. The company was an investor that agreed at that moment to invest a lot more capital into the business that I was building at the time, which was called ePrize. We were sort of a digital marketing agency. I had about 500 people at the time. Here's a picture of one of our rooms. Anyway, based on this verbal commitment, I got right to work, hired new executives, signed new office spaces. I placed expensive ad buys, was all in. And then I got the call. Hey, Josh, you know that big investment we talked about? Listen, the internet stocks have tanked on Wall Street. The conditions have changed. We've decided to get out of venture capital investing altogether. So we're backing out on our funding commitment. No money for you. You're on your own, but don't take it personally. I took it personally. The thing is, it wasn't just my career and identity tied up in this business. I was responsible for 500 families. No time to wallow. I had to get right to work. And the next couple of weeks were hell. 7 a.m. start, midnight end, if we were lucky, 7 days a week. I was trying desperately to save this beautiful company that we poured our heart into. And it all came down to one day. And maybe you've had a pivotal moment like this in your career. Here's what happened. It was a Friday, and that was the day that payroll was due. I was getting close with some new investors, but we weren't quite there. That morning, I woke up and I knew we had an all-company meeting scheduled. I prepared 2 speeches. What would I say to my team if we saved the business? What would I say if we lost it? So 15 minutes before the meeting, my stomach is in a knot. I'm sweating. The color rushed out of my face. The new investment hadn't come. And I was just stewing, realizing I was going to be the loser that tanked this beautiful company. Well, as I finished my concession remarks, 8 minutes to go, we got a wire transfer from new investors. I walked into this meeting exhausted and said, team, we saved the business. Now, just to be clear, I got lucky. It could have easily gone the other way. And as we know, luck is no strategy. So I've decided to trade luck in that moment and since that time with something different. The notion of cultivating the one thing that all human beings have in excess, which is human creativity, ingenuity, creative problem solving, inventive thinking. And I sort of built it into this phrase that I've been saying ever since, which is simply called find a way. First of all, it acknowledges that there is a way, and it allows each of us to solve it and to discover a path forward the way we think is best. Now, speaking of discovering a path forward, as we know right now, our folks, the world, we're in the midst of not one dimension of change, but sort of a multiverse of change. And it's not just the talent war or inflation or supply chain. It's all of these factors on top of one another. And when they stack up, it's giving us a pretty clear message that we can no longer simply rely on the models of the past and expect the same result. As HR professionals, and as we try to bring the most out of our people, we're going to have to embrace an entirely new and fresh approach in order to meet the challenges of the day. And I believe we're in a bit of a leadership crisis. And not to be overly dramatic about it, but the very way that leaders engage, the way they cultivate not just compliance anymore, but ultimately success, it has shifted dramatically in the last couple of years. And it really gets back to this thing that I'm so passionate about is human creativity, innovation. This came from the PwC annual Global CEO survey. The skills gap was the ability to effectively innovate. And the majority of leaders identified their current capacity as insufficient. So there's sort of good news and bad news here. The bad news is most leaders, unfortunately, are unprepared to cultivate every drop of creativity of their team members. Here's the good news, though. I've been researching human creativity now for a couple of decades, and the research is crystal clear that all human beings, I mean all of us, we're hardwired to be creative. That's our natural state. So you're not actually like teaching somebody a new language, more like you're awakening a part of themselves that already exists, which is an infinitely simpler and more powerful task. So here's what's happened. Innovation is now becoming democratized. It used to be reserved for a select few, but we've gone from sort of top-down innovation from the R&D folks or the C-suite to bottom-up innovation. We're going from a situation where there's only a few creative roles, maybe in the marketing department, to everybody is an innovator. And ultimately, the role of leader is shifted from cultivating compliance to cultivating ingenuity. And even though many of us have achieved our success in the column on your left, that green column is where we find our future. That's where we find our possibility. And many of us grew up, we were trained to follow the formula. But that in and of itself is a broken formula. And here's why. This is what we grew up with. I know that's not the org chart of everybody on this call. I certainly hope not. But this is the environment that we were trained in, that we built our skills. And the other way to look at this is the negative force that we must fight through. This is the enemy. And so instead of people defaulting to no, we have to find ways to advance creativity in every box of the org chart. So this brings me to my experience as a musician. I'm very passionate about jazz. I know it's not for everybody. It's a sort of an acquired taste. But when I'm playing jazz, it's this thrilling, dynamic environment where you're improvising, you're always discovering new possibilities, you're collaborating with fellow musicians. And I actually think it's the exact metaphor for leadership today. The metaphor for leadership used to be that of a classical conductor. One person, CEO, stands in the center of the room. And the job was about compliance and accuracy and alignment. Get everybody to play the notes exactly as Mozart intended. But we don't have that luxury anymore. The world is changing too quickly. There's too much volatility and turbulence. Today, we have to perform at our best with constantly changing people, constantly changing objectives, and most of the notes not in front of us on the sheet music. In other words, we got to play some jazz. And when you pull out the musical notes, this is actually what jazz musicians do. Jazz musicians adapt to changing conditions. They're navigating uncertainty and ambiguity, using situational awareness and active listening, real-time collaboration and problem solving, recovering quickly from setbacks, and ultimately improvising to deliver the best possible outcomes. Isn't that exactly what we're being called to do as leaders? And by the way, that's not just what jazz musicians do. If I just swap out that word jazz musician with great HR leaders, nothing changes. This to me is the recipe for success for HR professionals going forward, which is, again, using this sort of fluid and adaptive state of mind rather than a rigid checklist state of mind. And that's why we're here, isn't it? We're here to gather new insights and find and discover new paths forward to enjoy sustainable success, navigate uncertainty, and ultimately come out strong on the other side. And to get there today, I'm going to encourage you to think small. Not think small thoughts or small dreams, but as we go after innovation, the problem is this. We often think of innovation only as these giant breakthroughs, and they seem so risky and so overwhelming that we shrink up and do nothing. A better approach to cultivate organization-wide innovation is to, in fact, think small. My most recent book was called Big Little Breakthroughs: How Small Everyday Innovations Drive Oversized Results. I spent over 1,000 hours and tried to answer a simple question. How do the most innovative leaders think and act? I interviewed CEOs, billionaires, celebrity entrepreneurs, Grammy award-winning musicians. And I tried to uncover, what do they do every day? What are their mindsets and tactics? And what I found was remarkable and counterintuitive. They don't swing for the fences with every pitch. They don't take wild, high-risk moonshots. In fact, they cultivate small innovations on a high-frequency basis. Think of them as micro-innovations that can be part of your daily group. And most importantly, creativity shifts from something that you do to something that you are. There's sort of an identity shift that we can all be innovators. And I think that the role of HR leaders is pretty simple in the next decade. It's helping everyday people become everyday innovators and making sure that innovation is not a once-a-decade thing, it's an everyday business. Let me show you an example. I recently learned that the Panama Canal almost wasn't in Panama. The US government agreed to fund the project, and it actually came down to two countries, Panama and Nicaragua. At the time, both countries were nearly identical in terms of population and income. Both countries agreed to the project. The cost would have been about the same. The geography would have been about the same. And it was deadlocked at a vote at the US Congress. Well, an individual person, not a politician, not a business leader, normal person like you and me, really wanted it in Panama and took it upon himself to inject that big little breakthrough. Could one little idea tip the scales? So here's what he does. He sends a postage stamp to every US senator. Keep in mind, he wanted it in Panama, but he sent them a Nicaragua stamp. Now, it's a little hard to see. This is the actual stamp, but you might notice that the stamp has a volcano on it. This was a loud message to the senators that Nicaragua was filled with volcanoes, Panama had none. And the history books reflect that this single act of ingenuity, again, tipped the scales in favor of Panama. That's why we have the Panama Canal instead of the Nicaragua Canal. But I want you to look at the difference, the ripple effect of one little act of innovation. Look at these two countries today. Nicaragua has had runaway population growth, yet the GDP of Panama is 4 times higher. By nearly every social metric, Panama leads by a considerable distance. Average schooling, health metrics, public safety, crime. And the per capita income of Panama is 15 times higher than that of Nicaragua. Since the construction of the canal, it's attributed to over $1 trillion of economic impact in this country, all from a postage stamp. To me, this is really encouraging because any one of us can provide that little dose of creativity that adds up to greatness. And so we used to think of innovation like this, all capital letters, it's the only flavor. If it's not worth $1 billion, it's not worth anything. And the big breakthroughs, inventing penicillin or the Panama Canal, those are important, obviously, but they're out of reach for many of us. The good news, that's not the only flavor. Now think about innovation just with a capital I. These are the 2 or 3 innovations a year that any one of us might land on, that while they might not make history, they absolutely make a difference. And then the often forgotten cousin, the all lowercase version, big little breakthroughs. These aren't 2 or 3 a year. They might be 2 or 3 a day. And if we can cultivate these small little adjustments, innovation is accessible and lower risk and available to every one of us. Think back to the canal for a second. It was the little innovation, the postage stamp, that led to the capital I innovation, the vote in Congress, which led to the big innovation, the Panama Canal. And that's how innovation will work for our organizations going forward. It's that bottom-up approach, not just being jammed from the top down. Thinking small. Another example. Let's say you wanted to launch a shoe company and compete with Nike. Good luck. I mean, Nike has global distribution, one of the top 10 brands in the world. They have billions of dollars of marketing budget. They have LeBron James as a spokesperson and Michael Jordan and others. How could you possibly compete? By thinking big, you might say, well, I'll get better celebrities. I'll spend more money on marketing. But the only way to compete is to think small. A husband and wife team in Pakistan had an idea, and they started their company and named it Atoms, competing head-to-head with Nike. The way they did it is through a small innovation, not a big one. They recognized that most human feet are actually slightly different sizes. Your left and right foot might be up to a half a size apart. And so they zeroed in on the idea of fit. And here's what they did. First of all, they launched the only company that sells shoes in quarter sizes. But here's the real fun part. When you buy a pair of shoes, they send you 6 shoes. Like if you bought a pair of 10s, they'd send you a 9 3/4, a 10, and a 10 1/4 for each foot. You try on all 6, keep whichever 2 you like the best, send the rest back prepaid. And so this way, they might not have the best colors, they don't have any celebrities, they don't even have a marketing budget. But because they dialed in the fit just right, that little innovation, the company has thrived, even against Nike. They're sold out for months, back order. This company is really rocking it out. And so that's our opportunity, is to look for the small opportunities to dig in and ultimately expand from there. I've always loved this quote from researcher Edward de Bono. You can't look in a new direction by looking harder in the same direction. If that's often what we do, we got to hit a quarterly number, so we just grind it out. And that might work in the short term, but it is absolutely not sustainable. And we know the repercussions of this: burnout, stress, anxiety, mental health crisis. And the common wisdom is that let's just grit it out and be bulletproof and can't have feelings anymore and have the toughness of a Navy SEAL. Again, no disrespect to these authors. I love all these books, but that's not sustainable. And I really believe as HR leaders, there's a better way. And that better way is helping our folks prioritize creativity over hustle, agility over brute force, ingenuity over perfect planning. That's the recipe that works on a sustainable basis, even in turbulent times. And I know we've had a lot of discussion about work-life balance over the last many years. And of course, this new phrase, work-life integration, I actually think is better, because we're not one person at home and a different person at work. We're a human being, and we can show up fully in all dimensions of life. And the good news is what I'll share with you today can be applied across the board, absolutely in our businesses, but also in our families and our communities. Personally, I use these same things, which I'll share with you at home. And Riaz mentioned, this is my wife, Tia, the absolute love of my life. We're here with our 7-year-old twins, Avi and Talia. I'm not sure they haven't joined a gang. They're a bit terrorist at times, but I love them dearly. And our 3.5-pound dog, Da Vinci, he runs security at the Linkner household. I mean, I also am very lucky. I have 4 kids in total. These are my 2 older kids, Noah and Chloe. This is Noah graduating college a couple years back, and Chloe in the middle. She works at Amazon in San Francisco. So the reason I bring this up is, again, I try to bring these same creative approaches to all dimensions of life, and I think you can as well, and you can help your folks do the same. Poet Tuli Kupferberg once said that when patterns are broken, new worlds emerge. So today at this important event, let's break some patterns together. Let's not rely on previous models. Let's discover some fresh ones. And to that end, what I've done is I've organized our conversation around 5 big ideas, 5 core mindsets to unlock big little breakthroughs. These are mindset shifts, mostly opposite of what you've been taught, but wildly effective. So I would encourage you to take an open mind and an open heart. As we explore these principles, think about how you can drive them immediately into your work and into your teams. All right, let's dive in. First core mindset, start before you're ready. Too often when we see an opportunity or a challenge, instead of going for it, we sort of wait. We're waiting for ideal conditions or a permission or some directive. But the problem is there's a real risk in waiting. We may lose that opportunity altogether, or at best, give up our head start. The best of the best do something different. They just get into action. even if they can't see the finish line. They're willing to bob and weave and course correct. They sort of adapt to changing conditions, and they find their way as they go. They start before they're ready. Meet Jesse Cole. He, at the time, was 23 years old and flat broke. Jesse has a dream, well, more like a fantasy, that one day he wants to own a professional sports team. Who doesn't? But this seemed wildly out of reach. There's just no way. Until he learned that in Savannah, Georgia, 1,000 miles from his house, the minor league baseball team was going through a bankruptcy. He could have done nothing, but instead he starts before he's ready. He gets into his rusted out old car. He drives 1,000 miles to Savannah, Georgia. He shows up at the bankruptcy hearing. He's the only one that showed. The city manager doesn't know what to do. So he's like, all right, let's give the kid a shot. So now here's Jesse in charge of a baseball team. No money, no capital, no game plan, no contacts, nothing. So he had to rely on internal resources. And what he did was fascinating. I like to use this phrase, he awakened the artist within. When you and I were 6, we were all artists, weren't we? It's been said that many kindergartners enter school with a full set of colorful crayons, and unfortunately, we graduate high school with a single blue ballpoint pen. What Jesse did is went back to that sense of childlike wonder and exploration that each of us have, perhaps dormant. And artists get curious, and they ask a lot of questions. So Jesse started saying, well, what's missing? Why is this team so broken? How come only 10 people show up to a game? What could I add or subtract to make the team better? What's an unexpected approach instead of a traditional approach? What could I borrow from other parts of life and apply to this team? What would happen if I broke some rules? And so here's what Jesse does. First of all, he's like, we need a fresh start. We got to rebrand the team. And he rebrands it as the Savannah Bananas. And maybe if you've heard about the Savannah Bananas, you can just type in the chat, "Go Bananas," and I'll see that you're tracking here. And I know many of you have, because this team has become wildly successful. So Jesse not only rebrands the team, but he rebrands himself. This is Jesse today. 7 days a week, he wears a bright yellow tuxedo. This is his game time uniform. He's getting creative. Well, Jesse studies the game and learns from his customers. We all should, of course, get close to our customers. And they told him, the game is too slow, it's too boring, it costs too much. So Jesse reverse engineered it. He said, how can I become the most fun team in baseball, the most fun team in any sport? And here are some of the fun things that he did. In between innings, he realized it was a slow period. So he trained his team to do choreographed dance routines to blaring pop music. But they changed the lyrics. So they always make them banana themed. Here they are jamming out to "Can't Stop the Peelin'." Every season, the uniforms start out as green because they're not ripe yet. And the fans never know what they're going to get, but they know they're going to get a surprise. Sometimes the team shows up in kilts. Sometimes they show up in tutus. There's a player that both pitches and hits on 5-foot-tall stilts. A few years back, sitting at this in my office here in Detroit, I get a bright yellow envelope. I open it up. There's a bright yellow postcard inside, handwritten. "Josh, my name is Jesse Cole. I read your books. I followed your work. I did what you told me. I applied it to this team in Savannah. Just wanted to say thanks." This is weird. I don't normally get fan mail, just so you know. But I never heard of the team. I looked them up, went down the rabbit hole, called up Jesse. We became fast friends. And in 2021, I joined the board of directors of the Savannah Bananas. So I have what you might call an inside baseball view into what Jesse's up to. Here's a fun thing. He says to me one time, "Hey, Josh, you know what a first base coach does?" I said, "No, not really." He's like, "Yeah, me neither. It's a dumb position." It's like, really? The runners know what to do. So if I have an extra player on that field, instead of having them help the runners, what if I flipped it and have them help the fans? Here's the first base coach flipping upside down. He knows nothing about baseball. He's a professional break dancer. So you can see he's doing a bit of a flip, but it's not only a physical flip, it's a metaphorical one, and a wonderful technique that I want to share with you. One of my favorite innovation techniques of all. I simply call it the judo flip. Here's how it works. You're facing a problem or an opportunity. Just pause and say, all right, how have we always solved this in the past? What does conventional wisdom suggest? And then ask a simple question. What would it look like instead if I judo flipped it? What's the polar opposite approach? In Jesse's case, instead of having the first base coach take care of the runners, flip it around, take care of the fans, that's a judo flip. Let's look at a couple other judo flips that Jesse was able to do. Here's a team of dancers called the Savannah Nanas. Instead of having young women scantily clad dancing for the team, he has a group of grandmas that are rocking it out. By the way, I've been to many games. They're awesome. They're really fun. What's the judo flip of that? Well, the dad bod cheerleading squad. So Jesse is sort of judo flipping his way, breaking conventional wisdom rather than complying with it. He does a couple other fun things. He realized that it's more than just the game, it's the overall experience. So they have all these rituals. People show up way before the game for a marching band parade and a pep rally. Remember in The Lion King when they held up Simba and sang the Circle of Life? Well, before every game, there's the presentation of the banana baby. Here, they hold up the banana baby. Everyone sings along. It's really fun. And so it's not just in the stadium. They film everything, share it online. Today, the team has 5 million TikTok followers, 5 times more than any Major League Baseball team. People fall in love. They start showing up dressed as bananas. They've come from all 50 states and over 100 countries around the world. People have actually tattooed the team's logo on their body. And there's Jesse making sure everyone's having a good time. Before long, the stadium fills up. There's now a waiting list a mile long. The team has gone on tour, and they're bringing their amazing theatrics to people all around the country. And here's the best part. The team actually starts performing better. Jesse told me he was focused on the fan experience more than the team, but because there was all this love, there was all this creativity and energy, that the team rises to the challenge. By every objective measure, the most successful team in baseball, the most revenue, the most profit, the most merchandise sales, the most social media followers, the best team performance, the best team engagement and retention, the best fan retention, like every objective measure, from Jesse Cole, who started with nothing. And it keeps getting better. ESPN runs a series on them. As mentioned, they're touring now all over the world. So this team has gone from literally bankrupt to this incredible cult-like following. And just rounding out the story, this is Jesse and his wife, Emily, beautiful people, holding one of their 3 foster kids. Just to be clear, when they started this team, they sold everything they owned, including their house. And they actually slept on an air mattress in this crumbling stadium so they could get the team rolling. Now that they've had some success, they wanted to give back, and they believe deeply in the foster care system. So they started a foundation to raise money and awareness for foster care. What did they name it? Well, you guessed, Bananas Foster. Just doesn't get better than that. All right, so this all happened. It was all a direct result of awakening the artist within and crucially starting before you're ready. Which brings us to our second big idea of the day. Break it to fix it. How many times have you heard that phrase? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't know who came up with that phrase. That's a terrible piece of advice. Let's remove that from our vocabulary, because think what it's saying. Why would you wait until something is broken before getting on with an upgrade? That's almost irresponsible. I think we have an obligation to our team members, our colleagues, our companies, our communities to do the exact opposite, to proactively look at systems, processes, approaches, technology that might be looking fine on the surface. Let's deconstruct them. Let's examine. Let's explore ways to make them better. We should be in a state of ongoing reinvention rather than a state of ongoing complacency. I learned recently that in competitive swimwear, there's a saying. If you want a fast bathing suit, the manufacturers, here's their phrase, smaller, smoother, faster. Which is why we have Speedos, smaller, smoother, and faster. Speaking of Speedo, meet Fiona Fairhurst. She takes over as the head of innovation for Speedo, and she's tasked with coming up with the fastest swimsuit on earth. Sounds easy, smaller, smoother, faster. But Fiona disregards that advice. She says, oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to break it to fix it. She starts looking around for inspiration. What else goes fast in the water? Well, boats, jet skis, fish, sharks. And she really got obsessed with sharks, the way they swim, they're super fast and agile. And of course, sharks don't wear Speedos. The shark's Speedo covers the whole shark. Not to mention, upon exploration, she learned that shark skin isn't smooth. It has little ridges in the skin that allows the shark to swim underwater. Well, Fiona, based on this, does something bold. She invents the Speedo Fast Skin Bathing Suit. It's a judo flip. It's the opposite of smaller, smoother, faster. Covers the swimmer from head to toe. And it's not smooth. The fabric is modeled after the shark skin with the same little ridges. When Fiona launched this bathing suit, industry colleagues laughed at her. They thought this was a joke. But within 2 years of its launch, it was responsible for 80% of competitive medals around the world. It became the #1 category killer, best-selling bathing suit. And she had this incredible economic success and better served her customers, all while her competitors sitting around saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is our opportunity, is to proactively look at what might be looking fine on the surface. And again, proactively break it in order to fix it. Jerry Seinfeld is a good example of this. When Jerry is doing stand-up, every year throws away all of his jokes. When he might do a standing ovation performance in Vegas, 1 year later, he won't repeat a single joke because every year he forces himself to start with a blank page. This ensures he stays fresh and relevant and creative instead of becoming complacent and stale and clunky. Software companies are great at this. Version 5.0 puts version 4.0 out of business. There's even a term for it, planned obsolescence. We can learn something from that because it doesn't only apply to products or jokes or bathing suits. It can apply to the way that we interview a job candidate, the way that we conduct a search, the way that we measure employee engagement, the way we give a performance review. And so that same approach, blank page first, break it to fix it, can really yield incredible results. And core to this philosophy is the notion that there are times that we need to let go in order to move ahead. Letting go of what was in favor of what can be. Letting go of what is already there in favor of what's possible. And that's a hallmark of innovators and something that we can embrace as HR professionals and inject deep and wide in our organizations. Fun example of that in practice, Ben & Jerry's, of course, one of the great ice cream brands. When a flavor of theirs is no longer successful anymore, they bury it. But I don't mean metaphorically. I mean they physically, literally, actually bury it. Outside their headquarters in Vermont, they have a graveyard. And here's what they do. It's not a criticism of the past. It's a celebration of life. They give it a champagne toast, they give it a eulogy, and then they let it go. They let it go to make room for something new. It's the same thing that Jerry Seinfeld's doing, giving their folks a blank page. And you might think that they're going to hide from this, like they'd be embarrassed of it. But in fact, they tell everybody. They even have a digital version on their website. So in other words, they're not embarrassed. This isn't a scarlet letter. It's a badge of honor. And I want you to think what it might feel like if you worked at Ben & Jerry's. What is the message to the team? That it's okay to take responsible risks, that it's okay to let go in order to move ahead. There's a fun technique I'd love to share with you, borrowed from Ben & Jerry's and Jerry Seinfeld. I just call it the business funeral. If you look around, maybe there's an approach or a practice that you've been using for months or years or even decades. And we usually know when it's time to go, but we hold on, don't we? Here's my suggestion. Identify what that is. Give it a funeral. Bring in some cake, say some nice words, and then let it go. Give your team that beautiful blank page that Jerry Seinfeld has, that the folks at Ben & Jerry's have, and you will be blown away what happens when people are liberated to start anew. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds all fun, but it sounds a little risky. Here's the good news. We need not take on abnormal amounts of risk. And the antidote to innovation risk is simply experimentation. Instead of coming up with some killer idea in the shower and then rolling it out to your entire workforce, just test it, cheap and fast. Like test it one meeting on a Tuesday afternoon, cheap and fast. Measure it. How did it perform? If it doesn't show any enthusiasm, dump it quick. If it shows a little bit of opportunity, expand the size of the experiment. So when you think of yourself more as an experimenter than a guns a-blazing risk taker, it completely neutralizes the risk of trying new things. A buddy of mine runs a software development company in Ann Arbor, Michigan called Menlo Innovations. They make medical device software and car software, etc. Anyway, he has this phrase, let's run the experiment. It's the way they just move anything forward. He's like obsessed with this phrase. He says it 100 times a day. And one of their fun experiments I wanted to share with you was an HR experiment. One of their people a few years back had a baby, and they came back from maternity leave. But she said to him, "Rich, we have a problem here. I don't have any childcare. The childcare is full, and grandparents live too far away. I think I'm gonna have to resign." And so Rich said, "Well, why don't you just bring the baby to work?" She's like, "Oh, are you kidding? That would be nuts. Like, it's gonna make a huge fuss and distract everybody." He said, "How do you know? Let's try it. Let's run the experiment." It turned out that was a wonderful experiment, and they created a culture where people can bring their babies to work. And it celebrates who they are both in and out of the office. And then they even discovered that their clients behave better when babies were in the meeting. And it was like this weird symbol, like, well, if they could do something crazy like that, what else could they do? And so Rich's advice, and my advice is, kind of parroting back to you, is that don't assume it's not going to work. Why not just run the experiment? Give it a shot. Let's see what happens. I think that's a really healthy approach because the best leaders are the best experimenters. The best innovators are the best experimenters. And here's another technique. Again, it's important to me today to give you not only some inspiring stories, but some practical tools that you can put into use in the months and years to come. I know that every one of us has a to-do list. Here's my suggestion. Why not also have a to-test list? Very simple. Keep it on your phone just like your to-do list. Anytime an idea pops in your head, big, small, weird, doesn't matter. Don't judge it. Don't analyze it. Just stick it on the list. The mere existence of a to-test list will boost your creativity. It keeps it top of mind. Everyone's thinking about it. And the best way to do it is make it a shared list. If every team has a to-test list and they're constantly adding ideas and constantly testing small things, it will boost in a huge way the creative impact, the innovation impact of those teams. Very simple technique, very powerful. Which leads us to our third core mindset shift of today: use every drop of toothpaste. This is a playful way of saying that we can be resourceful and scrappy rather than just throwing external resources at problems. And often that's our first instinct. Let's throw money at it. Let's throw more people at it. Let's throw headcount at it. But startups kind of do the opposite. They get real creative without a bunch of resources. I often talk to leaders around the world and they tell me, I'd love to be more innovative, but I don't have enough money or time or bandwidth or facilities or inventory. And I always smile and say, if the amount of external resources equaled your level of creativity, the federal government would be the most creative organization on the planet. And we know that quite is not the case. So with that in mind, let's take a look at this principle, using every drop of toothpaste. So as mentioned, I play jazz guitar. I played over 1,000 concerts around the world, put myself through college playing music. And actually, when I was in school, this is a picture 30-some years ago. I don't even remember what state I was in at this time. But I had a professor that would force me to remove strings from the instrument. I would have to take off up to 3 strings at a time. You can imagine if your resources are now cut in half, you would think that your creativity would tank. But a surprising and counterintuitive thing happened. When those strings were off, I could no longer rely on the patterns that I knew. In other words, I was forced to solve musical problems in a fresh way. And instead of tanking, my creativity actually accelerated. So my point for you is, even if you're in a location, there are times on a day-by-day, project-by-project basis where we're lacking the external resources that we crave. But that might be an opportunity. It's almost like your soul is calling your creativity forward. And doubling down on those internal resources may yield a far better outcome. Which reminded me of the poster child of this principle, MacGyver. He's actually my favorite superhero because he had no superpowers. Can't fly, he has no x-ray vision. MacGyver carried duct tape and a paperclip, but always managed to get out of a jam. The show became so popular, it's actually now part of the English language. The Oxford Dictionary defines a MacGyver as a verb to make or repair something in an improvised or inventive way, making use of whatever items are at hand. I love that. And by the way, isn't that the job of every HR professional today? Isn't that exactly what we're being called to do? Love it. Although I found one I like even better. This comes from the Urban Dictionary. They define a MacGyver as a verb or noun, someone who can jumpstart a truck with a cactus. Kind of like that. However you define it, let's bring our inner MacGyver to the game and let's encourage the folks on our team to do the same. We all have this power inside of us. Why keep it dormant? Why not liberate it? Because our teams are going to be more effective. They're going to be more engaged. They're certainly going to be more happy. Another quick example of this principle in action, there's a bike company called Van Moof, which ships hybrid electric bikes direct to consumer. The bikes, unfortunately, were getting damaged at a very high rate during shipping. Well, the leaders get together. What should we do? How can we fix the problem? One leader suggests, well, how about thicker packaging material? Yeah, but that was expensive. They couldn't afford it. Another leader said, oh, I know, easy. What about one of those white glove delivery services? Even more expensive. Again, our first instinct is often to throw money at it. The folks at Van Moof, though, kept going. Eventually, one leader says, wait a minute, time out. He said, think about a TV for a second. Think about a good old LED TV. That TV comes in about the same size box and with the same weight as our bikes. How can people ship TVs every day with no damage, but our bikes are getting all jacked up? Well, this led to a pretty innovative approach. They didn't change the packaging material. They didn't change the shipping carrier. They didn't change a single thing except they printed a TV on the box. That's it. Same box, a little extra ink. And you know what happened? Damage rates were reduced by 70%. So the point I'm making is that sometimes the best ideas are not obvious and they don't require money. They actually require less than you might think. But if we can bring these ideas to the surface, just think of the problems that we can solve together. And I'll share a quick example, a personal story. So again, I built this company called ePrize, and we designed, built, and ran digital promotions for large brand advertisers. We had to do the design, the technology, and the legal work. Well, we got hired one time by United Airlines, and they hired us to build an online sweepstakes. Grand prize, $1 million. We were excited. It was a big piece of business. And again, we had to do the legal, the terms and conditions. Well, we get into the legal research. And so in this program, people had to enter from a number of countries around the world that United served. So we get into the program and learn that in Brazil, which had to be an eligible country, a drawing of this nature by Brazilian law must be done on Brazilian soil. So we're thinking, sweet, we get to go to Rio. Until we learned that in Australia, which also had to be an eligible country, a drawing of this nature by Australian law must be done within the physical boundaries of Australia. This was a massive problem. I was a small company. I didn't have an extra $1 million laying around to give away 2 prizes. I'm not about to run an illegal contest. And I didn't want to have to go back to my big new client and tell them we're too stupid to take your business. So I did what you might think. I gathered my executives all afternoon. We locked the doors. We drew on the whiteboards. How can we solve the problem? And we ended the day with nothing. I went home that night and didn't sleep a wink. Well, the next morning, I'm sitting in my office, freaking out, and a young woman pops in. She says, "Hey, Josh, my boss was in that meeting, and I have an idea." Well, this young woman was in our legal department, and she was able to do this because we weren't super hierarchical. She didn't have to get permission. We could all talk to each other, open door policy. And she said, "I have an idea." Her idea, I'm not kidding, saved my company. She said, "Josh, let's do the drawing at the Brazilian embassy in Australia. Technically Brazilian soil, technically in the boundaries of Australia." It saved my company. And the reason I bring this up is that as leaders, if all the ideas have to come from us, we may never reach our full potential. But if we empower all people in our organization to bring ideas forward, we become unstoppable. The only thing I did as a leader is I created an environment that was safe. It turns out that fear is the biggest blocker of creativity, not natural talent, fear. And truthfully, fear and creativity cannot coexist. If that woman was fearful that I was going to yell at her or fire her, she would never show up. But because we created an environment that was safe, creativity blossomed naturally. And that's what can work for me, and it certainly can work for all of us today. Which brings us to our 4th big idea of the day: seek the unexpected. Too often we gravitate to the tried and true. But my suggestion is let's challenge ourselves a bit to go out on a limb, to look for those oddball, unexpected, unorthodox ideas, because sometimes those are the most effective. So it's not just fun, it's actually an effective strategy. So I mentioned my twins earlier, Avi and Talia, and thank God they're healthy and doing great, but it didn't start that way. My wife and I were actually on vacation. She was 26 weeks pregnant and had a complication. We had to have an emergency delivery. So these are what's called micro preemies. They were 14 weeks premature. And at the time, they were less than 2 pounds when they were born. This is a picture of what they looked like about 1 week after birth. So this was a very scary time for us. We spent 104 days in the neonatal intensive care. Both kids had to have heart surgery. I mean, we were really freaking out. And so I can really relate to what the agony is of parents and children in a children's hospital setting, which brings us to the Children's Hospital at the University of Pittsburgh. Now, they were trying to make their customers, sick kids and their families, feel better, have a better experience. What's the obvious approach? Softer pillows, better lighting. What's the seek the unexpected approach? These are the window washers. So the hospital came up with this idea, called up the window cleaning company, who happily paid for the uniforms. The cost to the hospital was $0. No productivity was lost, had to clean the windows anyway. But now you got Spider-Man and Batman and Superman, and they're entertaining the kids as they do their work. Absolute game changer. It takes the attention away from the medical care. Those kids look forward to it for days. By the way, it's even better for the window washers. Before, they were doing a rather mundane job, weren't they? Punching the clock. Now they discovered purpose and meaning to their work. Back to this idea of big little breakthroughs, just to be clear, this did not make $1 billion, but it did make a difference. I just want you to imagine for a second, what if we brought ideas like this to the surface every day? What if every single person in our organizations brought ideas like this to the surface every day? We all have ideas like this. They're locked inside of us. And if we can liberate and unlock that dormant creative capacity, amazing results can follow. Imagine we took a Better Works field trip and went on over to London, England. We're having a good old time. We're looking around, checking out the museums and architecture, until we look down at the street and see this. It turns out that cigarette butt litter is the single biggest environmental challenge, not only in central London, but in many large cities around the world. It's one of those pesky problems. People keep trying to throw money at it, not much success. Well, enter Trewin Restorick. Now, Trewin is an ordinary guy. He's not like a PhD. He doesn't work for a defense contractor, but he saw this environmental challenge and wanted to help out. And he did so by inventing something, well, a big little breakthrough. He invented something called the ballot bin, which basically, using the technique, is called Option X. So the technique here is what they did with the window washers. It's like, okay, instead of the obvious answer, A, B, or C, what's a less obvious answer? And again, I call them Option X. Those are these oddball, unorthodox ideas. So Trewin's Option X idea is called the ballot bin, which allows smokers to vote with their butts. He mounts these bright yellow bins at eye level outside of pubs. And people then are challenged with a question: which is your favorite food, hamburgers or pizza? Mine's pizza. You stick your cigarette butt in the receptacle. You have like an instant bar chart. Brilliant. And it didn't require a huge amount of study or regulatory approval or $1 billion. And the fun is that each week when they empty out the cigarette butts, they can change the question. So every week it's different. They can be fun. They can be provocative, etc. And here's what ended up happening. A problem that seemed unsolvable. When ballot bins are installed, they reduce cigarette litter by 80%. Trewin went on to start a company. He's now in 27 countries around the world, making a real impact in this environmental challenge. Well, I interviewed Trewin for my book. I was fascinated by his story, became kind of friendly with him. And it's funny, I was about to hang up with him. And I said, wait, I have one last question. How do you keep your people innovative? Like you have this really simple solution, you sell it all over the world. How do you keep pushing the boundaries? He told me about a ritual that he has. And his leaders, especially his HR leaders, rituals and rewards are our tools. This is our major way that we can effectuate long-term and sustainable cultural change, innovation change. And here's what Trewin does. A very low cost, a little crude, but every Friday at his company, they have F Up Fridays. He says the whole word. I'm just being polite. But here's what F Up Fridays are. They have a full company meeting. And one by one, each team member has to stand up and proudly share what they F'd up that week and what they learned from it. Inevitably, they get to somebody who didn't F something up that week. And everyone is like, well, why not? What are you going to try next week? I just want you to think about the message that this zero-cost ritual drives deep into the DNA of this company. That part of your job is to be an innovator. We're counting on you to be innovative. It's okay to take responsible risks. We understand that to be innovative, we're going to stumble, and we got your back. And so, again, whether you feel free to borrow that ritual or create one of your own, but these rituals can drive really important progress on a sustainable basis. Let's take a look at a couple other innovative rituals. Another one for you. One company that I work with issues every team member 2 corporate get-out-of-jail-free cards every year. Here's what they say. Go out on a limb. Try something new. And if you screw something up, hand us a card. You're off the hook. No questions asked. On an annual review, a leader will be disappointed with a team member if they haven't used both of them. So you might be thinking, gosh, that feels really risky. But my loving challenge back is, what's the risk of not doing something like that? Irrelevance? Mediocrity? Now, I've noticed that so many leaders try to play it safe, but then they discover, to their dismay, that was the riskiest move of all. Another fun one, a company that we work with, they wanted people to share a lot of ideas, but they didn't want people to be discouraged. Like, there was no way the company could embrace all the ideas. And of course, every idea wouldn't be a great idea. So they created a very simple low-tech ritual. At their corporate headquarters, they have these they're like 4-foot tall glass jars. Anytime an idea, their entire HR system throughout their idea collection process, they put a white marble in the jar. Anytime an idea is embraced, they put a red marble in the jar. And over the years, they saved the jars. So in this high frequency hallway at their headquarters where thousands of people walk back and forth every day, there's a whole wall of white with little specks of red. And it's a low-tech visual cue to remind people, yeah, it's going to take a lot of white ideas to get to a red one. It's going to take, but keep trying. Don't be discouraged. Okay, so we've talked about getting a little unexpected. We're going to round it out with our fifth and final core mindset to help you unlock big little breakthroughs. This one is simply called fall 7 times, stand 8. I did not write the phrase. I borrowed it from a Japanese proverb. But here's why. In working with innovators around the world, my observation is that they look at setbacks and failure differently. They don't wallow in self-pity. They're not ashamed. They're not gutted and humiliated when something doesn't go perfectly. In fact, they recognize that setbacks are a part of the process. And if they want innovation, they're going to have to tolerate some mistakes. The second thing they do is, instead of not just beating themselves up, they just look at it as data. And then they say, what can I try differently next time? So they're always trying something new, even if it's a slight adjustment or a pivot. And so it's the notion of creativity fused with tenacity. Those two forces come together, we become unstoppable. I'm often asked when I'm playing a jazz gig, hey, Josh, how do you know you're going to get it right? Like you're playing this really complicated, fast music. It's challenging. The dexterity is hard. You're making it up as you go. How do you know you're going to get it right? I always laugh and say, I know I'm not going to get it right. Never have, never will. Thousands of performances, I always make mistakes. And so my confidence as a musician doesn't come from thinking I'm going to be perfect. It comes from knowing how to recover. And of course, that doesn't just apply to jazz musicians. So I thought I'd stick it on the screen for you. Confidence is not expecting you're always going to be right. Confidence is knowing how to bounce back. And if we can instill that in our teams, deep and wide, now we have a confident organization that feels that they can walk into the unknown and know they're going to come out strong on the other side. So I mentioned a couple of times I'm proudly from Detroit. That's where I am today. And I was born in the city, not the suburbs. And it's a fascinating example of this principle in action. Our city once was the Silicon Valley of our country. But then we sort of lost our way instead of finding our way. And we got away from our creative roots, and you name a problem, we've had it. Well, you may have heard that this once broken city is now really rising from the ashes. And I believe will be studied for decades to come as one of the great turnaround stories in American history. A personal example, we played a very small piece in this, of course, but my partners and I had a crazy idea. We said, what if we start a venture capital firm in downtown Detroit, backing tech entrepreneurs? So maybe we can help restore the innovation and the opportunity in our beloved city. People like Fiona, they laughed at us. They're like, hey, you can't do this in Detroit. Go to New York, go to Silicon Valley, go to Boston. So of course we did it anyway. We bought this building. It had been vacant for 20 years, right in the heart of Detroit. All the windows were bombed out, as you can see. It was tagged with graffiti, vandalized, and we invested. Not just in the building, although we wanted to create a safe place where people could be creative, but we started backing these passionate entrepreneurs, giving them coaching and support and mentorship and a toolkit where they could become innovators. And here's what ended up happening when people could seek the unexpected and try new things and start before they were ready. When we opened this building, there was not one tech startup in the entire 140 square miles of Detroit, Michigan. Within 18 months of opening our building, there were 70 tech companies, but not across the whole Detroit. There were 70 tech companies in one block of our building. Over 1,000 creative entrepreneurial people working in these tech companies, eating in local restaurants, living in local apartments. These four gents, we funded their company. Today they employ 200 people in downtown Detroit. And here's one, the entrepreneur sitting in the white shirt, Greg. He came to me with this idea, and I loved him. Smart, talented, humble. We backed his idea. We were excited. We launched the company. We had high hopes. Actually, it didn't work out the way we hoped. Kind of fizzled. And we were worried. I mean, it missed expectations. Many of our advisors told us to give up, take a zero. But we wanted to apply this fall 7, stand 8 principle. So instead of writing this off, we worked with Greg and helped him evolve his business. He ended up finding a great pivot. Well, the rest, as they say, is history. If there are any tennis shoe fans, you might recognize the company. It's called StockX. StockX is the largest global platform for online high-end kicks. They also sell other things, but today they employ 2,000 people around the world, and the company has been valued at $3.8 billion. Just to be clear, I'm in no way taking credit for Greg's success, nor Detroit's turnaround. I just wanted to share with you a personal example, playing a little small role in this. But these ideas work. They're not just theoretical ivory tower stuff. actually work in the real world. And if we can do this in Detroit, just think what you could do across your organization. So we've covered 5 big ideas here today. Start before you're ready. It's the notion of just getting in motion and using your ingenuity and creativity to figure it out as you go. Talked about breaking it to fix it, disrupting traditions and conventional wisdom rather than complying with it. Judo flipping our possibilities forward, using a business funeral to invent new things, having a to-test list, using every drop of toothpaste, letting our inner MacGyver come on out, and getting scrappy and resourceful. We talked about seeking the unexpected, looking for those option X ideas, developing rituals and rewards that allow our folks to do just that. And finally, when adversity strikes, because it's inevitable, we fall 7 times and stand 8. Now, these principles don't require capital or years of study, but if you can bring an open heart to the situation, I think you're going to discover they become wildly effective. And that's what we're facing right now. We're facing a new challenge in the world of HR, in the world of business in general. And I would suggest that I hope that today is an inflection point, and tomorrow is a brand new chapter. Tomorrow you have a blank sheet of music, and it's up to you to compose a symphony. With the tools we've covered today and your desire to continue to win and soar, you have everything you need. It's not out there, it's right here. And my hope is that you can use this as again, a jumping off point to new possibility. It's time. It's time to start before we're ready. It's time to seek the unexpected. It's time to awaken the artist within. It's time to compose our symphony and write a song that matters, however that music might look for you. And together we can get there with the support of BetterWorks, one big little breakthrough at a time. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be with you today.
Amazing. Amazing, Josh. I'm looking at all these comments. Let's give it up for Josh. I'll give you virtual snaps and claps. When is the Netflix special dropping? All of these examples were so rich, so practical. I'm looking at the clock. We only have about 60 seconds, but if you could distill how to make innovation a daily habit, a starting point, when you talk about the idea of just starting small, what's something we can do tomorrow to be innovative, even when there is resistance?
Simple habit. Give yourself a 30-day challenge. Spend 1 minute a day. That's it, 1 minute. And each day, try to take on some challenge that has nothing to do with you. Like I live in Detroit, but I might take on a challenge. How do I improve traffic in Atlanta? All I'm trying to do is not solve it all at once, but say, what are some small ideas I could develop that could help traffic in Atlanta? And maybe you're going to say, how can I reimagine a waiting room in a doctor's office? How can I make the TSA line at the airport faster? For 30 days, try some unrelated problem and just see if you can pick away at it. And what it's like jumping jacks for your creativity. 30 days later, you will have awakened the artist within.
I love it. It reminds me of the habit to just brainstorm for questions, not answers, and just do that on a daily basis.
You got it. Exactly.
All right. Josh Linkner, right there. Let's give it up one more time. Thank you for doing this.